Welcome to The Quiet Truth, where lay Catholics protect their children from digital evil. I'm Tom Borak with episode 15, Web Safety for Kids. In this episode, we continue with our how-to guide to raising faith-filled children in the middle of the culture of death. You remember last time we said that the job is divided into three parts. First, reducing the quantity of foolish and evil messages that the children receive, then analyzing and exposing the errors in the messages that they do receive, and then finally giving them as much truth as possible in as many ways as possible. Our last episode, we focused on the need to not supply our children with a pocket-sized internet connection that they can use all day, day or night. In today's episode, we're going to talk about other larger pieces of internet connection technology, like the computer and all its permutations. But first, I'd like to put this in a little bit of a historical context. When I first became involved with the Catholic homeschooling movement, which was some decades ago, the main source of digital evil that was afflicting children was television. Broadcast or cable television. And a lot of homeschool families, because they were so focused on what was happening with their kids, really quickly discovered that they needed to turn that thing off. And a lot of them gave them away or put them up in the closet so that they could watch one or two Christmas specials or maybe the Super Bowl once a year. They decided that they were better off without those kind of messages afflicting their children. And, I reached the same conclusion pretty quickly myself. What I found was that taking kids away from the boob tube, that we used to call it television, created calmer children. Children who were better able to interact with adults and better able to interact with each other. It created children that were more mature, that had better ability to concentrate, children that could appreciate things like literature and other kinds of learning. I spent quite a bit of time at an event that was called the Homeschool Hangout. It was a very generously donated space donated by a local Christian church. It was a large gymnasium and then a really large indoor play area. And there were 100, 150 kids of all different ages, homeschool kids, who would be turned loose in that environment for 3 or 4 hours once a week. Now, it was full of noise and it was full of childish energy, of course, but it was a joy to be there. And everyone who went was struck by the contrast between the behavior of those children and the behavior that you'd expect from an equal number of children of those ages who had been given traditional schooling. They were calmer, they could deal with each other in a more mature way. It was just kind of a joy. Now, I don't know how much of that difference in behavior was caused by the fact that homeschooled kids spend more time with their parents. And I don't know how much of that change in behavior was caused by the fact that they're not in schools, which tend to have this culture of us versus them. The brick and mortar schools, most such schools, every school that I've ever been in has had sort of an us against the teachers cultural difference. Let's see how much we can get away with. And of course that leads to lots and lots of foolishness and lots of near occasions of sin. And these may have been factors in the kids' behavior, but the other parents, I think, almost uniformly, and I, based on our own observation of our kids and other people's kids, thought that a tremendous amount of this difference was caused by the absence of television in their lives. And of course, broadcast television in those days was, it was pretty bland, and it was pretty uniform, and yes, it was mildly amoral, and yes, there was some sexy stuff, and yes, there was probably too much violence, and there was too much amorality, and there wasn't enough God-centered programming. But those stations that we used to watch back then, they were like a bunch of fuzzy little gerbils compared to the internet. which is more like a horde of flesh-eating rats. Not only does the internet have content that is more evil, more sinful, more extreme, but it's also able to target our worst desires. It targets each individual, and because of the way that you interact personally with the technology, it feeds you more and more content that feeds your interests, including your interests in particular kinds of sins. So it tends to show you a lot more opportunities to be around the near occasions of the sins to which you are most vulnerable and to which your particular children are most vulnerable. Nasty stuff. Think of a personal computer or tablet as a million gigawatt, 10,000 megahertz near occasion of sin machine with an LCD laser stupidity enhancer, because that's what it is. It's really, really powerful stuff, and the power is not going in the direction you want if your kids are using it unsupervised. Think I'm exaggerating? You have not digested the first 13 videos in this series, have you? Let's get down to the nuts and bolts. Rule 1 was don't buy one of those cell phone internet connections. And rule number 2 is if you decide to give your child access to a computer or tablet or other internet connection device that's larger than a cell phone, put it in and keep it always in a public room in your house. And make the absolute rule that the child may not use that technology unless there is a parent actively supervising. In the room, actively supervising. That's the only circumstances under which that device can be used. And if the child uses the device under any other circumstance, if he takes it out of the room, or he's operating when you're not around, and you catch him, or you look at the browsing history afterwards and find out what's been happening, that thing gets locked up for 6 months. 6 months. No exceptions. And the second offense, the punishment is even more severe. Now, what if there's a device in the house that belongs to an adult? Well, the same rules apply. The child may not use that device except with the adult's permission in the main room. And you don't give the child the password to the device. You password protect it, and each time the child is going to use the device, the parent or the owner of the device has to put in the password for them. If they violate that rule, if they hack the password or somehow get a hold of it, and you can't change it conveniently, lock it in a cabinet. And if that's not feasible, get rid of it, buy a laptop, and keep it under your pillow at night. It's that important. Now, when you impose these rules, don't try to convince other parents that you're right. It's just too hard. Do what you know to be right and respond to their objections, at least in your own mind, as follows. Objection. Children need to understand digital technology in order to succeed in today's world. They have to understand word processing, data processing, communication software, graphic software, communications of all kinds, and mapping technology, and maybe a dozen other things. And you are depriving them of that. Response. Well, I agree that they need those things, but I'm not depriving them of anything. There's the machine, and I'm ready to sit with my child and supervise for however many hours it takes. Objection. Your child has to get comfortable with the technology. Your child is going to take the laptop and take it to his or her room and play with it on the bed, maybe in the middle of the night, going to sit on the corner on the floor, going to roll around on the floor, playing with the laptop in all the positions that teenagers and young kids assume, and that's the natural way. And they can't learn what they need to learn if they have to be in a room with you under adult supervision all the time. Response. Yes, they can. There's absolutely no research to suggest that children can't learn when they're under adult supervision. In fact, my life experience suggests that they learn better when they're under adult supervision. Objection. There aren't enough hours in the day to supervise the kids like that. Yeah, actually there are. You see, when I'm home, I'm generally not doing things that I can't do in front of my kids. I can supervise them while I read a book or a magazine or a newspaper. I can supervise them while I'm working on something on an internet-connected device. I can fold and sort laundry. I can exercise. I can talk to my spouse. I can talk to my children. I can do 1,000 things in their presence. And you know what's great about it is that while I'm in their presence and I'm doing those things, I can occasionally talk to them about what I'm doing and share my life with them. And they can talk to me about what they're doing and share their lives with me. It's a joy and not a burden. And they don't need to use the computer more hours than I am available to supervise them, because I am available a lot. Well, so much for part one, limiting the quantity of foolish and evil messages that come in. Once you do that, the few messages that get through to their kids will be much easier to deal with. And you can analyze them, and you can look at the errors, and you can explain them to your kids. You can laugh together about them. You can ridicule them. If that doesn't seem comfortable to you, look at the first few videos in our series, The Quiet Truth. Look at how we looked at the foolish and evil messages that come to kids from most fiction. Or look at the foolish and evil messages that come from most political discussions. Look at the foolish and evil messages that come to them about the family and appropriate behavior of young adults. And the more you do this, the more you'll get in the habit of spotting the nonsense that's coming in. But you know, when you do that, when you analyze the messages, it's kind of a joyful, fun thing to do with your kids. It is also time consuming. And I think what it will do is it will make both you and your children realize what an enormous job it would be to analyze all the messages that most kids get, leaving the internet connection open 24/7. It will tend to make both you and your children want to expose yourselves, to more quality content, to content that doesn't have to be debunked, to content that fosters truth and intelligence and virtue and appropriate habits of mind and an appropriate point of view about the world. Hooray! Thank you for your kind attention.